The execution of Taberon Honie is set to take place in 7 hours.
He's been on death row for more than 25 years and now sits inside an observational cell, which is protocol.
Honie will be strapped to a gurney and given pentobarbital to end his life. Now, the Utah Department of Corrections is expected to give regular updates leading to the death penalty sentence being carried out. The next one will be at 5:30. Both the prisons here in Salt Lake City and in Gunnison are on lockdown until the execution is carried out.
After being on death row for 25 years, Taberon Honie's execution marks a turning point. His crime, the brutal killing of his ex-girlfriend's mother, Claudia Benn, who strived to protect her grandkids. Honie's troubled call to his ex-girlfriend before the murder continued to haunt Utah for decades. Let's dive deeper into the chilling details of the case of Taberon Honie and what drove him to commit this crime. Taberon Honie, who was born on the 29th of October 1975, grew up in First Mesa, a Hopi reservation in Arizona, along with his 5 siblings. According to the petition, Honie was raised in poverty and faced familial issues. Honie reportedly drank alcohol and smoked marijuana in the early years of his childhood. On the night of July 9, 1998, 22-year-old heavily intoxicated Taberon Honie made a threatening call to his ex-girlfriend, Carol Pikiavit, and asked her to meet him. Carol, however, refused to meet him, partly because she had work commitments. Honie didn't want to hear a no from her and therefore frightened Carol by saying if she didn't meet him, he would kill her mother, Claudia Benn, and her 2 nieces, making off with their 2-year-old daughter.
This gentleman breaks into this lady's home. He knows her. He beats her, brutally beats her, bites her. Then he slits her throat 4 times with a 13-inch knife. Then he uses that knife to sexually mutilate her.
Claudia didn't change her mind and turned down his request, knowing that wasn't the first time he had threatened her like this. Honie kept trying and made 2 more calls to Carol before she and her sister Benita left for work before 10:30 p.m. Claudia Benn used to look after her 3 granddaughters, 2 preschool daughters of Benita and 1 of Carol's, as 2 mothers worked. Just after an hour of the last phone call, Honie booked a cab and arrived at Benn's house in Cedar City, Utah. He broke down the glass sliding door using a rock and entered the house. Benn, who was with her 3 granddaughters, tried to protect herself and the kids using a kitchen knife. However, Honie overwhelmed her soon and turned her knife to her throat, cutting her throat ear to ear and down to the spine.
The night Claudia was killed, she was babysitting her 3 grandchildren. Honie went into Claudia's home because Claudia was helping her daughter by letting her stay there.
At around 12:30 a.m., someone in the neighborhood called 911 to report the incident. As police arrived at Benn's residence, they found a shattered glass door. The police ordered everyone in the house to come out. This is when Honie made his way out through the garage, his hands and forearms completely covered in blood. Officers asked him to raise his hands while interrogating him about the blood, to which Honie replied, "I stabbed her. I killed her with a knife." Honie was then arrested after he confessed to his crimes. As they went inside the house, officers found a partially nude, lifeless body of Claudia Benn in the living room. A bite mark was visible on her left arm with a large knife beside her. Benn's lower body seemed to be mutilated, with 2 deep stab wounds to her genitalia, causing damage to her pelvic cavity of her abdomen. Honie was also about to her, but stopped only when he learned that Benn was dead.
In 1998, Honie broke into Claudia Benn's home in Cedar City, killing her with a butcher knife in front of her grandchildren, including Honie's own daughter.
Officers kept looking around the house when Claudia's 3 granddaughters, aged between 22 months and 4 years, appeared from the back of the house. Each one of them had blood on them, but one of them was covered in blood from head to toe. It was Benita's daughter. She was wearing underwear with a t-shirt when Benita and Carol were leaving for work. When she was found, she was only wearing a t-shirt. As she was dressed again, someone spotted her underwear covered in blood. It confirmed that Honie also her after murdering, mutilating, and assaulting Benn. After Honie was arrested, he was investigated 3 times separately in the next morning. Each time, Honie expressed remorse for the murder and said she wasn't meant to die. The state of Utah had charged Honie with aggravated murder.
I'm not trying to say the crime didn't happen. It did happen. I'm not trying to say, no, this didn't. It did happen. I'm the one that did those things. I'm the one that took Miss Benn's life.
According to Honie, he was heading towards Benn's house with the thought that he would sleep under the porch until Carol came back from work. However, when he arrived at her house, Ben and Honie began arguing. Honie told police that Ben started the argument and insulted him from the glass sliding door when Honie lost it. He then shattered the glass door and went inside. Honie said he just wanted to frighten Ben. As per court records, Ben was waving a butcher knife but was overtaken by Honie, with him holding the knife to her throat. Honie said during the struggle, both of them tripped and Ben landed on the blade, cutting her throat. Honie waived his right to trial by jury and chose a bench trial. On May 20th, 1999, Honie was sentenced to death for aggravated murder, burglary, object, and forcible.
He decided to let a judge decide his sentence instead of a jury. In the quarter century since, his attorneys have tried to appeal, but the U.S. Supreme Court decided to file the execution warrant this June.
On January 11, 2022, Honie's death sentence was upheld by the Utah Supreme Court, as Honie lost his first round of appeals. In 2003, Honie aimed for post-conviction relief in Utah District Court, referring to the errors made during his trial. In 2005, Honie submitted an affidavit with the claim that he couldn't make sense of the aspects of the jury waiver and asked his attorney to withdraw the waiver. In 2011, the Utah District Court rejected the relief on Honie's claims. In May 2015, Honie reached out to federal court for relief, giving 14 claims. However, on June 12, 2019, the federal district court turned down all of his claims. On May 1, 2024, the Utah Attorney General submitted a request for Honie's execution warrant. On May 24, 2024, the judge rejected a lawsuit questioning Honie's execution methods of lethal injection and death by firing squad. On June 10th, his death by lethal injection was set for August 8, 2024.
The judge here in Cedar City signed the death warrant, setting an execution date of August 8th. Taberon Honie will be put to death by lethal injection. Let's play back what the judge had to say in court.
The lethal injection with a new combination of drugs was chosen, having fentanyl, ketamine, and potassium chloride, which was never used in any execution. Honie went for an appeal to replace his lethal drug injection with a single dose of pentobarbital, arguing that a 3-drug combination would cause unnecessary and severe pain.
The Utah Department of Corrections says it will instead use ketamine, fentanyl, and potassium chloride.
Honie's attorney said in a lawsuit, Honie does not suggest that a method of execution must be instantaneous or painless to meet constitutional standards. However, a method of execution must refrain from causing unnecessary or super added pain or suffering. As discussed above, execution by a single dose of pentobarbital is feasible, can be readily implemented by the UDC, and would significantly reduce the risk of severe pain inherent in UDC's current protocol. Defendants, therefore, are constitutionally obligated to employ such methods. In July, Honie submitted a mercy petition to the Utah Board of Pardons and Parole, mentioning his childhood traumas and poverty as justification for his crimes. Honie's attorney discussed the childhood of Honie and his parents, saying that both Honie's mother and father saw domestic issues as children and were snatched away from their families. They were sent to Indian boarding schools and never knew how to raise kids before they began parenting their kids without electricity and running water. They lived in a 2-room house with their parents fighting and drinking each day. The attorney claimed that the kids had no place to escape as they were living in a small house.
Today, less than 20 days away from that scheduled execution, he's asking the board to spare him of the death penalty.
Honie said, "Yes, I am a monster. The only thing that kept me going all these years, the only thing I know 100%. This would never happen if I was in my right mind. I make no excuses. We had no recreation center, no after-school activities, nothing. We lived in a poverty level below the city slums. We all had a view that I will never amount to anything. I will never be able to leave the mesa. So what is the use?" The petition mentioned, in a 2-room home there is no privacy. The children could not escape their parents drinking, arguing, and fighting.
Another thing that stood out to me about his parents being absent from the home and drinking is the worry it caused.
It further explained that these multi-generational traumas of his family and his people were inherited by Mr. Honie through genetic, biological, behavioral, psychiatric, and emotional legacy. And it was not just Mr. Honie who was affected. His siblings have their own struggles, including depression, legal difficulties, and problems maintaining intimate relationships. Honie's attorney said when he was a preteen, he and his friends were already used to cocaine, heroin, marijuana, and drinking alcohol. Honie continued to use these substances until the day he was detained for murdering Ben. Furthermore, Honie also reportedly struggled with depression and went through several head traumas in his childhood, which is said to have affected his personality, according to the petition.
Well, the death penalty sentence of a convicted killer, Taberon Honie, has been upheld by the Utah Board of Pardons and Parole. Local legal analysts say it is likely that Utah will see its first execution in 14 years next month.
Taberon Honie showed remorse for murdering Ben, according to his attorneys. During his 1999 sentencing, Honie had said, "I regret that I have no excuse for my actions. My heart is sad. My soul cries out every time when I think of what I've done. Like I said, if I could change it all, I would. Believe me, I would." The petition also included that Honie's sentencing was affected by stereotypes. One of the worst stereotypical attitudes about Native Americans reared its head, quote. The attorney complained that the prosecutor had put the worth of Honie and Ben's lives in comparison, saying, "Honie did not murder a drunken Indian in the park or someone who spent her life drinking alcohol and puking and walking the streets and shoplifting at Walmart. He murdered someone that these people look up to. He murdered a superstar in the Paiute community." Claudia Benn was working as a substance abuse counselor and wanted to help people who wanted to get rid of addiction. She was the vice chairperson of the Shivvits Band of Paiutes, a tribe in western Utah. Honie's attorney said Taberon Honie was used to living in the prison and adjusted himself. He remained productive in his 25 years of life in prison, even getting a high school diploma in prison. Honie did all of this so his and Carol's 27-year-old daughter, Tessa Honie, didn't have an excuse to drop her studies. Apart from that, Honie also learned plumbing and worked in the prison for 2 years, allowed to be trusted with screwdrivers, a razor knife, and pliers. They further said Honie had lived peacefully at the prison for 25 years, and if the court showed mercy to him in his death sentence, he would continue to live peacefully. They finished the petition with, "Executing Mr. Honie will only create more pain for his family and his daughter. Mr. Honie does not have to be executed and is worthy of mercy. A life sentence is appropriate." The board turned down his request for mercy. On July 7, 2024, members of the Utah Department of Corrections confirmed that they would replace the 3 combination drugs with a single dose of pentobarbital that have been used in executions in the USA since 2010. Utah officials arranged for the 3 doses of pentobarbital for $200,000 US. However, only a single dose of pentobarbital would be efficient unless there was a need to use more than the recommended dosage. On August 1, 2024, Honie's attorney sent a 2-page letter to Cox in order to get a temporary stop on his execution. On August 6, 2024, in response, Cox went through all the details and facts of the case and said, "His review indicates that a temporary reprieve is not warranted."
The attorneys of a Utah inmate sentenced to death this week sent a letter to Utah's governor asking for a temporary reprieve of the execution. Taberon Honie is his name. He's the Southern Utah man who murdered his ex-girlfriend's mother and is scheduled for execution this week.
He further said, "Indeed, it is not clear to me that any benefit would come from delaying Mr. Honie's sentence further." Cox said he fully knew that Honie has had every opportunity to challenge his sentence since it was imposed 25 years ago. On August 8, 2024, the day of execution, Ben and Honie's family members were gathered and sat in the rooms next to the execution chamber. Multiple lawmakers, government officials, and reporters witnessed the execution. At around 12:02 a.m., the prison warden, Bart Mortensen, read the death warrant. Honie had his last meal before the execution, which was a cheeseburger, milkshake, and fries. Honie spoke his last words. "From the start, it's been, if it needs to be done for them to heal, let's do this. If they tell you you can't change, don't listen to them. To all my brothers and sisters in here, continue to change. I love you all. Take care. Honie was tied to a gurney in the execution chamber.
From the start, it's been, if it needs to be done for them to heal, let's do this. If they tell you you can't change, don't listen to them. To all my brothers and sisters here, continue to change. I love you all. Take care.
At around 12:04 a.m., Honie was given the first dose of pentobarbital, which reduces brain activity and ultimately nervous and respiratory systems. As the dose began, Honie said to the two officials, "Thank you for taking care of my family." He then turned toward the room in which his family was sitting, separating them with a reflective glass. Honie said, "I love you." At around 12:14 a.m., a second dose was given to Honie, and at 12:21 a.m., the EKG confirmed that Honie's heart was stopped, as the prison director and warden dragged the white sheet over his head. After his death, Honie's father and cousin made their way into the execution chamber and performed the death ritual. Honie had spent his last day speaking to his family, including his daughter, mother, father, 3 of his sisters, 2 cousins, a brother-in-law, and his aunt. According to the records, later, Honie also slept for 2 hours and was given a tablet to watch movies. Instead, Honie used the tablet to listen to music, staying in his room alone.
Taberon Honie is now alone by himself in that observation cell. He'll be that way for the next approximately hour and a half until it's time to move him to the death chamber. We're told that he's given that time to essentially process his emotions and feelings from his meetings throughout the day.
2 miles away from the prison was a free speech zone in which 24 protesters gathered and condemned the death penalty by Honie. They sang and prayed together, waiting to get the word of Honie's death. Taberon Honie is the first person to be executed in Utah in 14 years after Ronnie Lee Gardner in June 2010. That's it for today's video. If you liked watching this case, give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Share your thoughts about Honie's death through lethal injection in the comment section below.